I was staring at my lunch today. I had this little plastic container of grocery store sushi.
Yeah.
And right there in the corner, kind of smooshed up against the fake plastic grass and that little wad of wasabi, was that pile of pink pickled stuff.
The garnish. It's always just there.
Exactly. The garnish, ginger. And I had this moment of realization. For, 99% of my life, that is exactly how I've thought of it. It's a palate cleanser. It's aesthetic.
Right.
Or maybe, if I'm feeling really adventurous, it's a background flavor in a stir fry. Or, God forbid, it's the thing I drink in a flat soda can when I have the stomach flu and I'm just desperate.
It's basically background noise. It's so ubiquitous that it just becomes invisible.
Totally background noise. But then you sent over this stack of research for today's deep dive, and I honestly felt a little foolish. Because we aren't looking at a garnish today. We aren't looking at a flavor profile.
No, we definitely aren't. We're looking at something that, according to these papers, acts surprisingly like some very heavy-duty, very expensive pharmaceuticals.
Sure. It really, really does. And that is the lens we have to use today. I want to challenge everyone listening to mentally take that knobby little root out of the produce section and, put it under a microscope. Because when you strip away the folklore, and let's be honest, there is a lot of grandma's magic tea folklore, you are left with a pharmacological powerhouse.
That is the perfect way to frame this. Ginger isn't just food. It is a complex bioactive compound, and the deeper you dive into the clinical data, the more you realize that the line between grocery item and medicine cabinet is, it's actually much blurrier than we think.
So here is our mission for today's deep dive. We are going to separate the old wives' tales from the hard, cold clinical data. We want to know, where does the science say ginger is actually medicine, and where is it just, a tasty placebo?
And we need to be very clear about the science part here, because if you Google ginger benefits, you will get a million hits claiming it cures everything from cancer to, bad luck.
Right.
We are being picky today.
Extremely picky.
We aren't pulling from wellness blogs or Instagram influencers or, anecdotal stories. The analysis we are walking through today is built on a stack of systematic reviews, meta-analyses, and randomized controlled trials. We are prioritizing what researchers call grade evidence.
Which stands for?
It stands for grading of recommendations, assessment, development, and evaluation.
That is a mouthful.
It is, but it's important. It's basically a filter for high-certainty evidence. It means we are looking at studies that are designed well, have enough participants to matter, and produce results that we can actually trust.
So we're not just guessing.
No. We want to know what actually works in a human body, not just in a test tube or some theoretical model.
And I have to say, looking at this outline, there were some serious aha moments coming up. We're going to talk about how ginger mimics a very common hospital drug-like, literally hits the same buttons in your body.
That one is fascinating.
We've also got this surprising rivalry with ibuprofen for a specific kind of pain.
And that one, it really shocked a lot of researchers when the data came out.
And this is my personal favorite part. There is a chemistry hack involving heat that completely changes its medicinal properties.
That chemistry hack it's just so cool. It really changes how you decide to use it in the kitchen versus, the medicine cabinet.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the heavy hitter. The thing ginger is most famous for. The gut. Nausea. Is this just soothing tea, or is there a real mechanism here?
Well, this is where the evidence is absolutely the strongest. If we look at the hierarchy of scientific evidence for ginger, nausea, specifically pregnancy-related nausea, is right at the very top. We have high-grade evidence here.
So we're talking about morning sickness, which, for anyone who has been through it, is a massive understatement of a name. It's more like all-day misery.
Exactly. And we have meta-analyses covering 12 randomized controlled trials. 12. And the data is just incredibly consistent. Ginger is significantly superior to placebo.
Okay, superior to a sugar pill, that's good. But how does it stack up against actual treatments?
Well, what's even more telling is that it is often found to be non-inferior to vitamin B6.
When you say non-inferior, in science speak, that's a compliment, right?
It's a huge compliment. It means it works just as well. Vitamin B6 is a standard first-line treatment prescribed by doctors for morning sickness.
So for a root to go head-to-head with the standard of care
and come out as non-inferior, that validates it as a legitimate clinical option. It's a big deal.
What kind of relief are we actually talking about here? Is it just taking the edge off, or is it a significant change?
So researchers use something called a visual analog scale, basically asking patients to rate their nausea on a scale of 1 to 10.
Right, the smiley and frowny faces.
Pretty much. And ginger consistently drives that number down by anywhere from 1.2 to nearly 5 points, depending on the study.
Wow. So if you're at an 8, which is, I can't function, I need to lie down in a dark room, and you drop 5 points, you're a 3. That's manageable. That's, I can go to work.
Exactly. That is clinically meaningful relief. It's life-changing for someone going through it.
And obviously, if we were talking about pregnancy, the elephant in the room is always safety. I feel like pregnant women are told to avoid everything. No sushi, no soft cheese, limit caffeine.
It's a long list.
So is ginger safe?
That is the crucial question, and the data is very, very reassuring here. The studies confirm that at standard doses, usually up to 1 gram per day, there is no increase in malformations or adverse events for the fetus.
No risk.
It is largely considered safe, which is why you'll now see it recommended by major health organizations like ACOG.
The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists.
That's them.
Wow, that's a big seal of approval. Okay, so morning sickness is a clear win, but I want to up the stakes. What about the really heavy-duty stuff? I'm seeing data here on chemotherapy-induced nausea.
Yeah.
That seems like a much higher hurdle to clear.
It is, and the distinction here is really important. Ginger isn't a replacement for antiemetic drugs and chemotherapy. We are not saying skip the Zofran and eat some gingerbread.
Right, please don't do that.
But the evidence strongly supports it as an adjunct therapy. That means you add it to the standard drugs.
Like a booster shot.
Exactly. And it seems to work best for acute nausea. That's the nausea that hits you in the first 24 hours after treatment. That immediate, awful wave.
Okay, so not the lingering stuff.
Less so for the delayed nausea, but for the acute phase, large trials have shown that adding ginger reduced the severity of that acute nausea by roughly 40%.
40%. That is massive, especially when you're already maxed out on other medications.
It is. It can be the difference that makes that first day tolerable.
So why is it doing this? You mentioned mechanism earlier. It can't just be that it tastes spicy and wakes you up. What is physically happening in the body?
This is where it gets really, really interesting. It's not just soothing, it's receptor pharmacology.
Okay.
Ginger contains active compounds, primarily things called gingerols and shogaols. These compounds act as antagonists to 5-HT3 receptors in the gut.
5-HT3. That sounds familiar. Why do I know that?
You know it because it's the target of the most famous anti-nausea drug in the world. Ondansetron.
Ondansetron. Wait, Zofran.
Zofran, that's the one, the little dissolving tablet they give you in the ER.
Wow.
Zofran works by blocking those 5-HT3 receptors.
Let me get this straight. You're saying ginger works on the exact same lock-and-key mechanism as a major pharmaceutical drug.
It targets the same receptor, yes. Essentially, those receptors are the ones sending the signal from the gut up to the brainstem, specifically the vomiting center in the brain that says, vomit now.
It's the alarm system.
It's the big red button, and ginger jams the signal. It blocks the message. It is acting as a natural antagonist to that receptor.
That is wild. It's literally nature's Zofran. I mean, obviously not as potent milligram for milligram, I assume, but the mechanism is identical.
Precisely. And there's actually a second mechanism, too, that works in tandem.
What's that?
Ginger physically speeds up gastric emptying. It increases what's called motility.
It moves things along.
Right. A lot of nausea and that feeling of indigestion or dyspepsia comes from the stomach just sitting there, not emptying. The food is just stagnant.
That awful stuck feeling.
Exactly. And ginger basically forces the stomach to empty into the small intestine, which relieves that pressure and that feeling.
So it blocks the vomit signal going up to the brain, and it hits the eject button on the stomach contents downwards, thankfully.
Downwards, exactly. It coordinates the movement in the right direction.
Okay, so that's the gut. Yeah. And I think most people would give you that one. We've all had ginger ale for an upset stomach. But let's transition to something that really surprised me in the research. Pain.
Right.
We usually reach for ibuprofen or Tylenol or maybe aspirin. But you're telling me ginger is a contender here.
It is, specifically for inflammatory pain. Let's start with osteoarthritis, that wear and tear on the joints, usually the knees. The evidence quality here is moderate to high.
And what are the numbers saying? Is it actually killing the pain or just making it a little better?
The meta-analyses show that ginger reduces pain and disability in knee osteoarthritis. Now, I want to be nuanced here. I'm not selling magic beans.
Of course.
The effect size is often described as modest. It's not going to numb you like an opioid would.
It's not morphine.
No. But it is statistically significant, and maybe more importantly, it is safe for long-term use.
Which opioids are definitely not. And even NSAIDs can be a problem long-term.
Right. Even drugs like ibuprofen, if you take those every single day for arthritis, what happens? You risk stomach ulcers, you risk kidney issues.
You tear up your stomach lining.
Exactly. And the amazing thing about ginger is that it often protects the stomach lining while it's treating the pain elsewhere. That safety profile makes it a huge win for chronic conditions.
And here's a data point that really stood out to me in the notes, the responder rate. What was that about?
Yes, this is fascinating. In some of these trials, they didn't just look at the average pain reduction. They looked at how many people actually felt a significant, meaningful difference. They found that 63% of patients using highly concentrated ginger extracts were responders, meaning they had significant pain relief compared to about 50% on placebo.
So it tips the scales significantly. It's not 100%, but it's a distinct advantage over doing nothing.
It is. But where ginger really, really punches above its weight, where it stops being modest and starts being a heavyweight, is dysmenorrhea.
Menstrual pain.
Yes, this is a major win in the literature. Multiple studies have compared ginger directly against NSAIDs like ibuprofen or mefenamic acid.
Head to head, not against the placebo.
Head to head, not against a sugar pill, but against the drug itself. And the result? Ginger is effectively comparable. It is non-inferior.
That is huge. Because millions of women take ibuprofen every single month for this. It's just the default. And you're saying ginger works just as well?
In the clinical trials, yes, but the dosing protocol really matters. You can't just take it once the pain is already at a 10.
So you have to be proactive.
Exactly. The sources suggest 750 to 2,000 milligrams per day, but you have to take it during the first 3 to 4 days of the cycle. You have to get ahead of the inflammatory wave.
And why does it work? Is it the same blocking concept as the nausea? A different receptor?
It's a similar concept, but a totally different target. We talked about 5-HT3 for nausea. For pain, we were talking about COX inhibition, cyclooxygenase enzymes.
The OX enzymes, I know those. Those are the things that produce prostaglandins, right? The inflammatory molecules.
You've got it. Prostaglandins are inflammatory lipids. In the uterus, they cause the cramping and the pain. And NSAIDs, like ibuprofen, work by inhibiting those COX enzymes to stop prostaglandin production.
So they shut down the factory that makes the pain molecules.
Right. And ginger, it does the exact same thing. It inhibits COX enzymes and lowers the production of those inflammatory lipids.
It is a natural COX inhibitor, just like aspirin, just like ibuprofen.
Exactly. It's hitting the same target.
What about muscle pain? Like if I go to the gym and I overdo it on leg day, I can barely walk. Can I pop a ginger capsule and be fine?
That's a little more nuanced. It's not an instant painkiller for muscle soreness in the way it might be for cramps. Taking it immediately after the workout might not give you that instant relief you're looking for.
So it's not a magic eraser for workout pain.
No. But what studies do show is that if you take it consistently around 2 grams per day over a period of days, it helps with the progression of delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS.
So it reduces the pain on day 2 and day 3?
Yes, it dampens the inflammatory response over time, so it's better as part of a recovery regimen rather than an instant fix.
Okay, so we've covered the stomach and the joints. Now I want to talk about something that feels a bit more systemic, metabolic health. This feels like the silent worker aspect of ginger.
It really is. This is where we look at these big chronic conditions like type 2 diabetes.
And what does the data say there? Is it just a mild effect?
It's actually quite compelling. We see significant reductions in fasting blood glucose and HbA1c.
And HbA1c, just to remind everyone, that's the long-term measure of blood sugar, right? The 3-month average.
Correct. And dropping that number is the holy grail of diabetes management. And the magnitude of the reduction in these studies is around 0.7% to 1.0% for HbA1c.
It's that a lot. Put that in context for me.
It's a huge amount.
Yeah.
To put that in perspective, many pharmaceutical drugs for diabetes aim for a reduction in that exact ballpark. A 1% drop in A1C is the difference between uncontrolled and managed for many patients.
Wow.
We also see fasting glucose drop by about 12 to 21 milligrams per deciliter.
That is not insignificant at all. So how is a root doing that? Is it blocking sugar absorption from food?
The main mechanism seems to be that it works by increasing insulin sensitivity.
Meaning your body's own insulin works better.
Exactly. It essentially helps your muscles take up glucose from the blood more effectively. It increases the expression of a transporter called GLUT4.
GLDLT4. I love these names.
You can think of GLUT4 as the door that lets sugar out of your blood and into your muscles to be burned as fuel. If the door is locked or there aren't enough doors, sugar stays stuck in the blood.
And ginger builds more doors.
Or at least it opens the existing doors more effectively. It helps your body clear the sugar from the bloodstream and actually put it to work.
That's a great visual.
And this systemic effect, it also extends to the cardiovascular profile too. There is very consistent evidence for lowering triglycerides and LDL, the bad cholesterol.
I noticed in the notes there was a caveat about blood pressure, though. It wasn't as straightforward.
Yes, and we need to be careful here. While there is data showing ginger can lower blood pressure, it seems to be most effective in younger populations. So under 50 and at higher doses, usually over 3 grams per day.
Interesting. Why younger people? Any theories?
It might just be that their vascular systems are still more elastic and responsive to the vasodilation effects of the ginger compounds. But for an older listener who is managing hypertension, you shouldn't just swap your medication for ginger and expect a miracle.
Right. It's not a replacement.
It's a modest effect, and the data we have is skewed toward younger cohorts, so more research is needed there.
And what about weight loss? I feel like every supplement on the planet claims to cause weight loss. Take this pill and melt belly fat.
Of course. And look, while ginger does improve these important metabolic markers, it is not a miracle weight loss pill.
Shocker.
The data shows statistically significant effects on BMI, but they are modest. We're talking less than 2 kilograms difference over a period of weeks or months.
So it's a helper, not a solution. It's a tailwind, not an engine.
That is the perfect way to put it. It optimizes the metabolism, but it won't cancel out a bad diet or lack of exercise.
Fair enough. Okay, let's pivot. We've been very grounded in high-grade human evidence so far. Now I want to go to the frontier, more theoretical stuff. Brain health and longevity.
Right. And I have to put my expert hat on firmly here and say, we are leaving the land of high-grade human evidence. We are now entering the realm of preclinical and theoretical data.
So just so everyone is crystal clear, there are no human trials proving ginger makes you live to be 100.
None. Zero. The sources explicitly emphasize a lack of human trials for longevity and specific mental health outcomes like preventing Alzheimer's.
But there are signals in the animal data, right? What are the aging hallmarks that ginger seems to interact with?
In cell and animal models, ginger is a superstar at combating oxidative stress. It reduces levels of something called MDA malondialdehyde, which is a key marker of oxidative damage in the body.
Okay, so it's an antioxidant.
A very effective one. It also appears to protect against mitochondrial dysfunction.
And the mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cell.
Exactly. As we age, our mitochondria get tired and inefficient. Ginger compounds seem to support their function, at least in these models. There's also some really interesting preclinical data on neuroprotection.
Protecting the brain.
Yes. A specific compound, 6-shogel, which we'll talk more about later, has been shown to reduce neuroinflammation and potentially inhibit an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase.
Acetylcholinesterase, that's the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter crucial for memory.
You got it.
And that's what Alzheimer's drugs target, isn't it?
It is. A drug like Aricept is an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. So purely chemically, ginger is doing something similar to an Alzheimer's drug in a petri dish. Or in a mouse.
Right. Big asterisk there.
We absolutely cannot claim this translates to humans preventing dementia yet. The gap between a mouse brain and a human brain is just vast.
And what about mood?
Yeah.
Anxiety, depression. I see claims online all the time about, drink this ginger tea to calm your anxiety.
The gap is huge here, too. Despite what you read online, there are almost no human randomized controlled trials specifically testing ginger for anxiety or depression.
Really? They're not at all?
Almost none. Now, that's not to say you won't feel better. You might feel less anxious if you take it, but that is likely a secondary effect.
What do you mean?
Well, if you are nauseous or in pain, and ginger fixes that, you will naturally feel less anxious. But a direct anxiolytic effect in humans, the data just isn't there yet.
Okay, so keep the expectations realistic on the brain stuff. Now, this next section is the one I've been waiting for. Optimizing the dose. Because apparently we've been doing it wrong, or at least we could be doing it better.
We can definitely do it better. And it all starts with bioavailability.
Which is just a fancy science word for how much of the stuff actually gets into your blood.
Right. And the active compounds, the gingerols, are actually poorly absorbed on their own. They get metabolized by the liver very, very quickly. So much like with turmeric, we have a bioavailability issue.
With turmeric, everyone knows the trick. You have to add black pepper. Is that the hack here too?
It is the same principle. The pepper hack. The piperine in black pepper inhibits the liver enzymes that scrub these compounds from your blood. So theoretically, yes, adding pepper to your ginger tea or taking a supplement that includes piperine could enhance absorption.
And I saw a note about fats, too.
Yes, these compounds are lipophilic, which means they are fat-loving. So taking your ginger with a meal that has some healthy fat avocado, olive oil, eggs will help absorption significantly compared to just taking it on an empty stomach with water.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, tell me about the chemical switch. This blew my mind. Fresh versus dried. I always just assumed fresh was better. Fresh is best, right?
Not necessarily. This is where the kitchen chemistry gets really cool. Fresh ginger is high in a class of compounds called gingerols.
Okay, gingerols. Got it.
Gingerols are fantastic for nausea. They're responsible for that classic taste, and they're pretty gentle on the digestive system. If you have an upset stomach, fresh ginger tea is your friend.
Okay.
But when you dry ginger or you heat it, you dehydrate those gingerols. A chemical reaction occurs. They lose a water molecule, and they convert into shogaols.
Shogaols. And they are different.
Oh, they are very different. Shogaols are much more potent. They are stronger anti-inflammatories, and they are stronger antioxidants.
Wait, so if I'm taking ginger for my knees, for that arthritis pain we talked about, I actually want the dried stuff, the powder.
Chemically speaking, yes. The dried powder or a heat-treated extract is going to be richer in shogaols, which are the real heavy hitters for pain and for those metabolic issues like blood sugar.
But there's a trade-off, isn't there?
There is. Shogaols are more pungent, they are hotter, and they can be more irritating to the stomach for some people.
So fresh is gentle and better for anti-nausea.
Exactly.
And dried or heated is more potent, better for anti-inflammatory, but potentially a bit harsher on the tummy.
That's a great rule of thumb. Fresh for the tummy, dried for the joints.
That is such a useful distinction. Okay, let's talk numbers. Dosage recap. If I'm listening to this and I want to try it, what other ranges we're looking at?
For nausea, you really don't need much. 500 milligrams to about 1 gram of active ginger. That's roughly 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of powder, or a couple of standard capsules, or just a good cup of fresh tea.
Okay. And for pain or diabetes?
For pain or metabolic health like sugar control, you need to go a bit higher. 1 gram to 2 grams is the general range in the studies.
So double the dose.
Pretty much. And if you're looking at blood pressure, some of those studies go up to 3 grams. But again, that's something you should definitely consult your doctor about.
And consistency matters. You can't just take it once and expect a result.
Crucial. Ginger has a short half-life. It clears your system in a matter of hours. So taking one giant mega dose in the morning isn't ideal.
So it's better.
Divided doses. Taking it 2 or 3 times a day, say 500 milligrams with each meal, keeps the levels of those active compounds steady in your blood all day long.
Okay, divided doses. Got it. Now, we have to touch on safety. We said it's safe for pregnancy, generally safe for most people up to about 4 grams. But there is a specific, very important warning for people on blood thinners.
Yes. This is the most important contraindication to be aware of. Ginger has mild antiplatelet activity.
It stops your blood from clotting as easily.
It inhibits the enzymes that make platelets stick together. Now, for a normal person, that's fine, maybe even healthy in some ways. But if you are already taking warfarin, aspirin, or Plavix,
You're doubling down on the effect.
you are stacking effects, and it can significantly increase your bleeding risk. If you are on any kind of anticoagulant, you must talk to your doctor before starting high-dose ginger therapy.
And I assume the same applies to surgery.
Absolutely. The standard recommendation is usually to stop taking medicinal doses of ginger 1 to 2 weeks before any scheduled surgery. You do not want to be antiplatelet when you're on the operating table.
That's very good advice. Any other warnings to be aware of?
There's a caution for people with gallstones. Because ginger stimulates bile flow, which is generally good for digestion, it can be problematic if you have a blockage or gallstones. It could potentially trigger a gallbladder attack.
Yikes. Okay, good to know.
But really, for the vast majority of people, the worst side effects are mild heartburn or burping, which is a bit ironic considering it treats nausea, but at high doses on an empty stomach, it can act up.
The ginger burps. I think we've all been there.
Indeed, we have.
So bringing this all together, it feels like ginger is one of those rare things that actually earns the title superfood, but not in that vague marketing way. It earns in a very specific, we know exactly which receptors it's hitting kind of way.
That's the key takeaway. It's chemically complex. It's effective for specific medical contexts, nausea, pain, sugar control, and it really matters how you prepare it. It's not just some kind of magic. It's actual chemistry.
It really makes you rethink the entire spice rack. It just blurs the line between food and something else entirely.
It does. I mean, if we connect this to the bigger picture, think about what we just discussed. Ginger acts on the same 5-HT3 receptors as powerful antiemetic drugs. It inhibits the same COX enzymes as common painkillers.
It's basically a low-dose pharmacy sitting in a jar on your kitchen counter.
Which raises a really important, provocative question. At what point should we stop treating the spice rack as just flavor and start respecting it as a low-dose pharmacy?
That is the perfect thought to leave us with. Next time you grate some ginger into your tea or your stir-fry, remember, you're not just making dinner, you're doing chemistry.